Hi there, this is Teri from stampinmagic.com. Welcome back to my channel. Today I haven't got a project for you as such. Instead, I'm going to show you how I get the best results using my Bokeh Dots stamp set. This set consists of 2 background stamps, although they're not the normal size of our background stamps. These are much smaller. Both stamps have the bokeh lighting effect on them, and one of the stamp also has a type of starburst effect as well, which is very pretty. When I saw this stamp set in the new annual catalogue, it appealed to me straight away. I absolutely loved it. So it was on my first order that I placed. Now, when I received it, however, I was so disappointed in the results I got from one of the images. Now, the image on the right, the starbursty type one, was fine. It was the image on the left that I was struggling to get good results with. Now, this is a new type of stamp set that's been developed by Stampin Up. It produces photorealistic style images when it's used, and it's called a distinctive stamp. This is the trademark name that Stampin Up have given this style of stamp. There's a special surface texture on the stamps that give depth and dimension to your stamped images. If you look closely at the stamps, you can see this special texture. It's almost like cross-hatching, but it's very detailed, very fine and very shallow, especially on the stamp that I was struggling with. You can find the Bokeh Dots stamp set on page 153 in the UK catalogue, but we do have several other distinctive stamp sets. On page 151 there's the All the Good Things stamp set, and on page 110 there's the Healing Hugs stamp set, and finally on page 101 one of our Christmas stamp sets, Stylish Christmas, also has a couple of distinctive images, and these are all recognised by the distinctive stamp icon below the picture in the catalogue. Now, one thing you need to remember when you're using this type of stamp is that if you use too much ink, it will fill in and overload the texture on the stamp surface, and that's what causes the issues. Now, for most of the distinctive stamps, you can use a regular ink pad and ink them up as normal. You just want to make sure that the ink pads you use are not too juicy. However, for this particular stamp, because it's such a flat stamp and the engraving on it is so shallow and so detailed and fine, I haven't had any successes with using an ink pad direct to the stamp at all. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you the type of result I got when I inked up this stamp in a normal way. I'm using balmy blue ink, and I'm using very light pressure when I'm inking up the stamp. But I can already see on the surface of the stamp that the ink is bubbling up where it's overflowing that texture. So I know when I stamp this down, I'm not going to get a good result. And even when I do a second generation image with this stamp, you still don't get a good result. The only time I get good results when using this stamp is when I use a rubber brayer. Now, Stampin' Up used to sell these brayers. Unfortunately they no longer do, but they're quite easy to get hold of. You can find them on Amazon. I'm going to use the same balmy blue ink pad, and I'm going to ink up my brayer. And you do this by rolling the brayer just in one direction. You don't want to go forwards and backwards. You'll get a much more even coating of ink if you just go in one direction. And then onto some copy paper, I'm going to take off the excess ink. Now I'm not using any pressure at all when I do this, I'm just placing the roller and then pulling it along. And then the ink that's left on the roller I'm going to apply to my stamp. And I'm going to do this in both directions so I get a nice even coat. Now you can see when I stamp this down that the impression I get is very good, albeit a little light. I think I removed a little bit too much of the ink from the brayer. The image has good definition and there's no blotchiness at all. Now I'm going to do another impression for you. So I'm inking up my brayer this time in exactly the same way, but I'm not going to remove any of the ink. I want to show you the type of results you'll get if you don't remove any of the ink first. So again, I'm lightly inking up that stamp with the brayer and then stamping it down. And you can see, although the result is better than when I used the ink pad directly to the stamp, you still get an uneven finish on your image. The ink has pooled into certain areas. I'm going to do it again, but this time in a different colour. I'm using Lovely Lipstick. So I'm inking up my brayer and then taking off the excess before inking up the stamp and stamping it down. And you can see clearly this time how close that stamped image is to the image on the front of the stamp set. I'm going to show you one more sample, this time using our grey granite ink pad. So again, I'm inking the brayer up lightly and then I'm going to remove the excess ink and then apply the rest to the stamp. Again, I'm using very little pressure when I do this. And when I stamp the image down, you can see that the impression you get is very consistent to what we had before. If you don't have a rubber brayer, there are several other things that you can use to ink up this stamp. First of all, you could use a piece of our stamping sponge or a sponge dauber, or you could use a foam brayer, which we also sell in our catalogue. The problem with each of these other options is that they all have a textured surface. They don't have a smooth surface like the rubber brayer does, so you're not going to get an even coating of ink on the stamp using them. Although the dauber has a smoother surface than the foam roller or the stamping sponge, the surface is tiny, so it does take up quite some time to ink up this stamp fully. The results you get using either the sponge or the sponge dauber are acceptable. They're much better than using the ink pad direct to the stamp. So this image is one that I sponged using our stamping sponge. I also did a second generation image, and you can see that both of these are acceptable. They're not as good as the one on the left, which is the one I did with the rubber brayer, but they're still very usable. And this is the result I got using a sponge dauber. So you can see that the image is very acceptable. It's just not quite as good as the brayered image on the left. It's not as even. And finally, here are some cards that I've finished. This first one used Balmy Blue ink, and I've used the Dandelion Wishes stamp set for all of these cards. The second one used Pool Party. This one was Lovely Lipstick and Poppy Parade. And then I switched to the other stamp, the Starbursty one, and I used Night of Navy ink, and the stamp set I used here was High Tide. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. Bye for now.